Welcome everyone. My name is Jakit Singh. I am going to be your instructor for this summer, and I'm really looking forward to it. This is a class that I teach pretty much every year. Um, and it's a class that I think it's not a challenging, it's sorry, not a, it is a challenging class. We deal with some difficult material in that we are reading primary texts that are often historical texts. So they're written in kind of different language styles, often translated. They're from very different times and places, but they are classic texts. The subtitle of the class is Classics of Political Thought. And so these are what we're going to be doing here together is reading some really foundational classical texts in the history of politics, the history of political thought that people have been reading for, in some cases, decades, in some cases, centuries. So these are enduring texts that we are going to be reading that students like you have been engaging with, reading, trying to figure out, learning from, debating about for a very, very long time. And the reason why these texts are the ones that we focus on is because, and there's lots of texts that we're leaving out. I mean, we're just dealing with a short selection of texts, but we deal with the texts that we do because they are particularly enduring in some way. There's something quite timeless or that speaks to people through the years, through the ages, because they speak to big questions of politics, of power, that we can learn a lot from. These are texts that I teach pretty much every year, as I said. And every time I read them, every time I teach them, there's something new that emerges for me. So they're very rich texts. There's a lot going on in them, and that's why they've endured. But that also means that they're pretty challenging texts. We're not reading, secondhand summaries of these texts. We are going straight to the source. We are reading Plato, is the author we're going to start with. And Plato is somebody who people read sometimes in high school, often in university, but then people continue to grapple with, and people write PhD dissertations, and people write books, and they continue to write books on Plato. So Plato's texts are um, they span from, being introductory. We use them as introductory texts, but we also treat them as very, very advanced texts for scholars, well-worn veteran scholars in the field of political theory or in lots of other fields. So these are challenging texts. And so we're going to try to work through things at a reasonable pace. I don't think that I ask too much of folks in this class in terms of like the pace that we go at. Excuse me. We will work through things, I think, at a quite reasonable pace, to give time to work through these quite dense and challenging texts. So we'll go through them at a hopefully a reasonable pace. Hopefully you'll find it to be a reasonable pace. We'll unpack the sections assigned for each lecture. We'll unpack those sections together each class. And I'm not expecting you to do this alone. We're gonna go through the text together. We're gonna pull out key themes. We're gonna try to figure out the key arguments together. We're going to try to figure out the puzzles and big questions that the text raises together. And we're going to do that together in lecture. And then you're also all going to have tutorial sections each week to grapple with the text with your classmates, a small group of your classmates, and your TAs, your tutorial leaders, who are experienced PhD students in this field. And so we're really lucky to have a fantastic group of teaching assistants that are going to be guiding you through your tutorials each week and grading your work. And so you'll meet your TAs on Thursday in Thursday's class. We won't do those introductions today, so we'll do that on Thursday. And as I said in my email to you, we will start tutorials next week. So you will not have to worry about tutorials this week. Your first tutorial will be next week. Okay, first question, Arshia, yes. Do you have a question?
Hi, sorry, I had a quick question about the tutorials. Are they all online or physical?
They are online. So good question. First thing I'm gonna do here is go through some key parts of the syllabus and go over some of those details. So let me actually pull that up now and we can talk about some of those details. Okay, everyone is seeing the syllabus on the screen. Are we good? Is my share screen working? Can I see some thumbs up if...
Solid.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so first thing, let me acknowledge I have not posted the syllabus yet. I will be doing so today, I hope, or perhaps tomorrow. I'm just finalizing a couple of things, but I want to go through some of the key aspects, at least, and the first part of the syllabus. We'll leave some sections of it to go through later, but I just want to go through some key aspects in the starting part of the syllabus to make sure we're clear about a number of expectations and details. Okay, so the first thing here, of course, is my name and my email address, my office, but that's probably not so relevant since we're doing this class mostly online. So I say here in terms of office hours, it's, I think, more useful for all of us rather than me kind of setting fixed office hours that may probably don't work for many of you. And then I kind of sit there by myself, wasting time for a couple hours. I think it's probably better if we just do an email um, uh, meeting so that we set up meetings quickly by email and figure out a time that is beneficial and works for both of us. And go from there. So please email me to set up an appointment, and we can meet. I've got a lot of flexibility, so that should be pretty easy to set up, either preferably on course days, but not necessarily. There's also, of course, we could chat after lecture in many days. If you have questions, I can stick around and answer questions that folks have. That's a possibility, or we can set up an appointment to have a private Zoom meeting. So just let me know. Your teaching assistants, I've got them listed here. Like I said, you'll be meeting them on Thursday. Uh, just, once again, we've got a wonderful group of veteran teaching assistants who are um, PhD students in our department and who have a lot of expertise and experience to bring to this class. So you'll be meeting them and working with them starting next week. So our lecture schedule is Tuesdays and Thursdays, 12:30 to 2:30. So these 2 hours, what we will do is we'll go for about an hour. We'll take a break. We'll take about a 10-minute break, and then and that'll be around the 1:30 mark, obviously. And then we'll come back and finish off the class and go till 2:20. So that's Tuesdays and Thursdays, and then your tutorials are scheduled also on Tuesdays and Thursdays, either at 2:30 or at 4:30. I've indicated here the various tutorials in the class and who the TA is for each tutorial. You should be automatically assigned to a tutorial when registering for the class, and so you should be aware of that. Again, we will start with the tutorials next week, so next Tuesday, the tutorials will begin for those of you with Tuesday tutorials, or Thursday next week. So you will be, before next week or before tutorial next week, you will be receiving some communication from your TA who will provide you with a Zoom link and how to attend your particular tutorial section. Okay, the course format. This part, please pay attention to carefully because it is not a strictly online course. This is a course designated as an ONCA course, which means that it is mostly online, almost entirely online, with synchronous lectures and live synchronous tutorials. But there are 2 in-person exams in this class. So in order to complete this class, you cannot be entirely remote. You have to be able to attend 2 in-person exams, that one of which is already scheduled, and I will say that I'll talk about that in a moment, and one of which is not yet scheduled, but will be scheduled during the designated summer exam period, which those dates I will also go through in a moment. But yes, this is not an entirely, online class. It is mostly online, synchronous, but with in-person exams. So you do need to be on campus for those exams. You cannot be abroad and complete this class, at least not entirely. You have to be in Toronto for a date in June and then a date in August. So we have, as I've kind of already mentioned, 4 online live or synchronous lecture hours each week, 2 hours on Tuesdays, 2 hours on Thursdays, and then 2 online live or synchronous tutorial hours each week. So this is an intensive class. You have to be dedicated to really working to keep up with this class. It is normally done over the entire school year, September to April, and we are doing it in a short 3 months here in the summer. So it is very intensive, and it will take discipline and dedication to keep up. And it's, simply even just the course hours alone, the formal course hours, 6 hours a week of lectures and tutorials. That is quite a lot. And so you have to really be focused and be dedicated to this course in order to complete it adequately and successfully. I will be posting video like recordings of the lectures each class. So while your attendance here in lecture is very strongly recommended, and I think it will benefit you, it'll benefit me to have people here to interact with, it'll benefit you to be able to ask questions and to interact, hear the questions of your classmates and jump in if you wish, or to just be able to stay on track. I think, if you get into the habit of just like, oh, I'll watch it later, things pile up and you get behind, and you get behind in this class, and it immediately starts to become difficult to catch up. So making a point to be here each Tuesday and Thursday will help you stay on track in the class. It'll help you to be engaged with me, with your classmates. But it is not formally required. I'm not taking attendance, and I will post the recordings afterwards. However, your tutorials are a different story. Your tutorials are required in terms of your attendance. Your TAs will be taking attendance. Your attendance and participation will be recorded and evaluated. So your tutorials are a different story. Attendance is required for those, and they will not be recorded and they will not be posted unless for some reason your TA decides to do that. That is, up to them, but your attendance is required, it's mandatory for your tutorials. And your participation, part of that is your participation is needed for the tutorials, and it's a part of your grade, your participation in tutorials. So that's all going to be evaluated and part of your success in the class. Okay. Let me also just say, some of you may have uh, taken, a synchronous online course more recently. It has been some time for me since I taught an entire course synchronously and online. I think since the pandemic, I haven't taught a synchronous lecture class. So, there are things to be aware of. Sometimes we have some technical difficulties, internet cutting out. Um, I've got, I'm recording lectures here at home. I've got a couple of dogs who might interrupt at some point. If my doorbell happens to ring from mail courier or something like that, in any case, so we've got to roll with it a bit. We're doing live sessions, and so sometimes there will be technical difficulties that arise, and we'll deal with that as necessary. If, for example, we have a internet outage and we can't continue, then perhaps I will just kind of record the remainder of a lecture and post it. But we'll have to deal with things as they come, as happens in a live synchronous course. Okay, let me just go through briefly the course description. So, this course is designed to introduce you to one of the major subfields in the study of politics, political theory. So, when I say that, of course, many of you will be politics majors because this class is required for politics majors and minors, and so many of you will be majoring or minoring in politics. Some of you may not be, um, but political theory, this is the course that's the intro to political theory, and all of the second year courses in the politics curriculum are kind of introductions to different subfields in the study of politics. So the politics department is organized as faculty and as courses. We organize our faculty and courses into different subfields of the study of politics. Some of the subfields are international relations or comparative politics or Canadian politics or gender in politics. And one of those subfields is political theory. And so this is the course that introduces you to that subfield of the study of politics that we call political theory. Back to my description here, it does so by surveying some of the central thinkers and classic texts in the history of political thought. Through these thinkers and texts, we will explore fundamental political concepts such as justice, power, violence, human nature, sovereignty, freedom, equality, rights, property, citizenship, obedience or disobedience, oppression, revolution, and democracy, as well as a wide variety of enduring problems, questions, and ideological traditions of political life. Throughout the class, we will also pay close attention to who is included in the values and ideals of each author and who is excluded. So it's not just a question of like what values and propositions and concepts and principles does each thinker espouse or articulate, but it's also a question of who do they include in those values and principles and who do they exclude from those values and principles. So we'll be talking a lot about that as well. Uh, so we'll be reading authors in terms of like who their theories are intended for and who their theories are not intended for, who is left out, who is either explicitly or implicitly um, left out of the theories. And that tells us a whole other set of stories. So we're going to be tracing that through each text and author. Going on in this course, we will be reading a wide range of texts that span many different historical periods and geographical locations. When doing so, we will attempt to read each text on its own terms and in its own context, but we will also try to stage a conversation across these authors and texts on some central themes. So let me just pause on this for a moment and say, because we are reading texts from very different times and places. This is a course that spans millennia in terms of and lots of various geographies and locations. And so because we are doing that, that there's a couple of demands on us as readers of these texts that come from very different times and places. One demand is to read the text and try to think about the context in which it arose. All texts, no matter how universal or general the themes are, all texts are shaped very deeply by their contexts and by the questions that their author is dealing their authors are dealing with in their own times and places. What are the big issues being confronted in that time period and by that author in that time period? And often, if not always, authors of texts in political theory are, they may be writing in general or abstract ways, but they are very often, if not always, addressing their writing to problems and questions that are preoccupying people in that time and place. We are all a product of our times and places, of our contexts, of our cultures, of our material realities. And so it is very important to read the texts as products of their time and place. And that's one demand that's placed on us to think about the context at least a little bit and to figure out how the text is speaking to that context and is shaped and constrained by that context. So that's one important demand placed on us when reading texts from really different times and places. But the other demand is that we kind of have to live up to in a course like this is to think about big, enduring themes and concepts and questions that span or transcend different times and places. So I've already said the reason why we read these texts and why they are classics of political thought is because they are texts that have stood the test of time. They are enduring in their importance and their significance and their material. Their substance is enduring in some way. And so the second demand or second task that we have when reading these texts, in addition to reading them in their context, is reading them as contributions to a kind of ongoing conversation and dialogue that human beings have been having about the big questions of politics over the entirety of human history. And so we read these texts in conversation with one another. And that requires taking them kind of, in some ways, out of their context and kind of thinking about these texts in relation to each other and as though they are addressing common themes and questions. And it's not just as though they are in many ways addressing common themes and questions. And many of the authors that we read have read the other authors in the class, at least those that, of course, that have came before them. Many of the authors that we will read will have read the previous authors that we will read in the class and have thought through them, have engaged with them, have something to say about them, or have given them at least some thought. So there is in many cases a quite direct conversation happening between and among our authors in the class. So those are our two big tasks when reading texts that come from very different times and places. We read them in their own context and we read them across contexts as a kind of ongoing, enduring conversation that transcends time and place in some ways. And of course, that doesn't transcend time and place entirely either, because we will read them. And there goes my dog for the first interruption I mentioned. Um, give me one moment. Let me um, uh, just ask her to silence herself. Okay, then. So, yeah, that's the kind of thing that we'll be dealing with in live lectures. So, also, let me just say on this question of live lectures, uh, you know, if there are technical issues or something going on, I'm not always going to be aware of them. So please speak up and let me know if there's some audio issue, if there's some internet issue, something going on. Please do let me know. Okay, and she is not going to stop, so I'm just going to have to proceed for a few more moments through this and then take a break here shortly. Okay. Um, okay, so coming back to my course description here, I just want to the last sentence in it, which I had not gone through yet. It says, in the first half of the course, the theme to which we will pay particular attention will be the relationship between morality and politics. And in the second half of the course, our thematic focus will be on the relationship between power, freedom, and oppression. So I'm going to say a lot more about these themes as we go, including our first term or first half themes on the relationship between morality and politics. I'll say more about that by the end of today's class. But let me just say for the time being, we're going to, in relation to what I was just saying about staging a conversation among and across the different texts that we're going to be reading in the class. One way of doing that, which I find to be helpful, is to try to focus on a particular set of themes, big themes, questions that the various authors address, and to use those common themes as a touchstone, as something to come back to focus on and to stage that conversation between the different authors. So, as I've said here in the first half of the class, I'm going to stage a conversation among these authors and texts on the question of the relationship between morality and politics. So I'm going to say more about that by the end of today's class. What do I mean by that? What are we getting at when we say the relationship between morality and politics? But that's going to be a conversation that we keep coming back to. We'll read the text as a whole, but we will keep coming back to the question of, okay, so we'll read the text more generally, and then we'll say, okay, let's pull out the way this author imagines the relationship between morality and politics. How are they imagining or conceptualizing that relationship between morality and politics? How do they grapple with it? And how do others that we read grapple with it? And how do they do so differently or similarly or what have you? So in the first half of the class, we will be focusing on the relationship between morality and politics as a theme. And in the second half of the class, we will be focusing on the relationship between power and freedom and oppression as our touchstone conversation. Okay. Let me pause for a moment and ask, are there any questions that folks have to this point which you want to ask or which need clarification? Is there anything that I've said so far that you want any clarification on? Okay. All right. So now let's look at the course requirements. So there are five main components of the class. There is um, uh, a paper assignment uh, that is in the first half of the class, worth 15%, and that will be on material from the first half of the course. I will be announcing guidelines and due date for that shortly. And then we will have a mid-course exam worth 20% of your grade. That will be on and only on material from the first half of the class, and it will occur after the first half of the class is completed. So, as we'll see in a moment, when we look at the schedule for the first half of the class, we have 6 weeks, and then we have a reading break, 1 week that's off. The mid-course exam is scheduled for the class time right after the first class period, lecture period, after the reading break. So I'm giving you the reading break to be able to study and prepare and review for the exam. But when the reading break is over, the first lecture class session will be an in-person exam on Kiel campus at York University that will cover all of the first half material of the class. So the date of that is already set. It is Tuesday, June 23rd from 12:30 to 2:30, our normal lecture time slot. It is in person on campus. The format will be announced and guidelines, and we'll talk all about that closer to, and we'll let you know all of that in advance. But the date is the most important thing because it is set and fixed, and it requires you to be at York in person on that date. Okay, then in the second half of the class, you have another paper assignment on some aspect of the second term material worth 20% of your grade. And then you have a final exam, and that will cover material from the second half of the class, not the whole course, second half of the course. It's worth 25% of your grade. And that in-person exam, that's our second in-person exam, it will take place in the designated summer exam period, which is scheduled from August 6th through 13th. I don't control the schedule for that. That will be set by the registrar's office. And so that will take place at some point in person during August 6th to 13th, whatever date and time they schedule us for in that exam period. So the first half exam will take place not during an exam period, because there is only technically one formal exam period for the summer term, but we will have one exam in our lecture time slot, and then we will have one scheduled exam during the formal exam period in August. Both in person, both require you to be in person on campus. Sorry for repeating myself, but I just want to be very clear because if you can't do the in-person exams, you can't complete the class and you should not be enrolled, just to put it bluntly. You cannot treat this as an entirely online class that you can say do from abroad. You have to be in person at least twice to complete the class. And so if you can't be, you should just frankly drop the class. Finally, your remaining 20% in the class is your tutorial participation grade. So tutorial grade will be assessed by your TA based on attendance and participation in your Zoom tutorials. So again, your TAs will be in touch. They will provide you with the link for accessing your tutorial during the designated time and day and time each week. And they will assess your attendance and participation in however they wish. They may ask for they may just look for your attendance and to be there and how much you participate in the weekly discussions, or they may ask you to do particular activities or little mini assignments in your tutorials to get your tutorial grade. That is up to your TAs. So you should be tuned in to them to let to find out how your tutorial grade 20% of your class grade will be assessed. But fundamentally, it will be on your attendance and your weekly participation in the Zoom tutorials. Those tutorials will really only work if folks are there and engaged and having read the material and having thought about it and having engaged with it, and they come to tutorial prepared and ready to think and discuss with others about the text. These are not lectures. Your tutorial leaders will not be just lecturing you further on the material. That's what I'm here for. Your TAs will be leading discussions on the material. So those tutorials will only work if folks show up, take it seriously, and ready to engage and discuss with the material, having read it, having thought about it, having jotted down some notes or some questions about it, having listened to lectures about it and thought through those. So there are various ways in which you can be prepared for tutorials. Often the tutorials will be a little bit behind the lectures so that there'll be at least a class behind the lectures so that you can watch the lectures and then go to tutorials and discuss the material that has been engaged with in lecture. So just be aware of that as well. So those tutorials, we need your commitment to be there and to show up and to engage with your classmates. And so they only work if folks fulfill that part of the bargain. But of course, they also the class only really works for you if you show up and engage with in your tutorials as well, because it doesn't really work that well just to listen to me lecture here, and that's not a very engaged. Although sometimes I'll engage with you and ask questions and engage with folks who are here, but that's not a major form of engagement, direct engagement. You're not really talking through things with your classmates and with me. So the tutorials allow you to really engage in a different way, much more directly. Engage with an expert in the field who can help answer your questions and guide you through the text more in a more small group setting. To engage with other learners, other people who are engaging with the text for the first time, to hear their questions and to work with them through the materials. So the class in general really only works for you and for us if you are attending tutorials and come prepared to engage with the text in tutorials. Having read the text and having watched and engaged with lectures. Okay. The textbook. The textbook is this text called The Classics of Moral and Political Theory, 5th edition from Michael Morgan, Hackett Publishing. The 5th edition is published in 2011. Now, the textbook can be purchased in hard copy, and there are lots of used copies around. So if you are a hard copy person, you can pretty easily find those for a discounted price, lots of used copies available. But it's not necessary for you to purchase this textbook. There is a couple of options. First, the textbook is available in its entirety as an ebook through the library's website. So I have linked to that here. I have linked to it on the eClass. So you can access the ebook through the library in its entirety. Most of the texts we read in the class, especially in first term, are from the textbook. Many of them from second term are also in the textbook, but we've got a few more in second term that are not from the textbook and that I have posted to the eClass as PDF files. I have also posted as a PDF file the very first readings for the class. Plato's Apology and Credo, 2 short dialogues written by Plato that we'll discuss shortly. We won't read them together today. We'll talk about them on Thursday, as I'll say when I go through this schedule in a moment. But because we are jumping into those very quickly, I have posted a PDF of those first 2 dialogues, those first 2 readings, Plato's Apology and another dialogue of Plato's called Credo. I've posted those as one file on the eClass. Now, one other option. This one is more off the record, although I'm recording this lecture, so it's not really off the record. However, there is a PDF available of the textbook, which I am willing to distribute to you. So, the ebook that is available through the library is kind of like an ebook format where you're kind of reading it online through the library's portal and can't be like saved and used as a PDF, at least not in its entirety. But there is a PDF of the textbook in its entirety, and you can email me for that text. I can't exactly upload it to the eClass for various reasons, but I am willing to send it to you if you send me an email, and I will promptly send it back to you. So I recommend to all of you to email me, and I will send the PDF of the textbook to you. Um, uh, or I will distribute them to the T. Many of the TAs already have them, or I'll distribute them if they don't. And the TAs can do that as well. Uh, so you can use electronic versions of the textbook or the hard copy. Of course, if you like working with hard copies, as I do, that's great. And you can, like I said, you can purchase those, especially used for a much less cost than the retail kind of price. Now, let me just say one last thing that I've noted here at the end of this section on the textbook. It is crucial to have a version of our textbook because for all of the assignments in the class, you must use our textbook in terms of all quotations and citations. They all have to come from our textbook. If you do not use our textbook in your assignments, if your quotations do not come from our textbook, if your page numbers do not refer to our textbook, if your the quotations that you use do not line up with the translations that are given in our textbook, you will fail your assignments. You will not get credit for your assignments. It is just one of these things that we have to require for some measure of safeguards or some measure of assurance that you are working with us here in the class and working through these materials that we have assigned. It is necessary for you to use our textbook in the class. So you can use an electronic version, a PDF that I'm willing to provide you, or the library's ebook version, or a hard copy version, but you need to have some version of our textbook. Otherwise, um, uh, uh, you will not pass your assignments. Yes, Jordan, you have a question.
Hi, Professor. Thank you. I was just wondering, since all our quotations have to be from the textbook, what significance do the readings have in our assignments then? Like the readings specifically, or are they derived from our textbooks? Do we have to quote the readings? Is that possible?
Yes, that's the point, that the readings are from the textbook, and like the assignments will ask you to engage with the text that we're reading, and you'll have to bring in support from the text in the form of quotations and page references. And so you'll have to show your work. You'll have to show, okay, this is where this author says this. This is how I interpret the author in this way and what their argument is in this way. And this is the passage that I derive that interpretation from. So you'll have to bring in support from the assigned readings into your assignments. So yes, that's going to be why you need the textbook you're going to be quoting and citing the textbook that contains the readings that we're doing together in the class. Okay, we're due for a break. Sorry, I've been going on a bit long here. I was hoping to have, but let me just quickly go through just in a minute here the first half lecture schedule. Sorry, Shams. Yeah, you've got a question?
Yes, hi, Professor. My question is, I see like there's a tutorial, like I'm not sure about if I can attend any tutorial session. or am I assigned to a specific one? Because I don't know, like my e-class is just being funny today.
Okay. Yes, you're not just your e-class, but your registration, your course timetable registration in the class should show a specific tutorial. So yes, you need to be assigned, and you should be assigned to a specific tutorial.
Okay.
And you can't attend just any tutorial. Each because you're assigned to a specific tutorial leader or a teaching assistant, and each teaching assistant only has one tutorial, and so you'll need to attend the tutorial that you're assigned to. Aria, yes.
Sure, thanks.
Good afternoon, Professor. Just one question. I was wondering if the syllabus is accessible on eClass or will this be posted after the lecture?
It'll be posted after the lecture. I haven't posted it yet. As I said, I'll post it later today or maybe at the latest tomorrow. So I'm going through it here on the screen, but I have not yet posted it because I'm finalizing a couple of things on it still. But I'm going through the main points that we need, at least for the time being here. So you can, if you need it imminently, you can go back and look at it through the video recordings, but I'll be posting it very shortly.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so let me just go through the first half lecture schedule just very briefly here. So today we've been going through the course syllabus and themes a bit, but we're going to be spending the second half of today's class after a short break here on the question of what is political theory. We're going to be grappling with that question of like, what are we doing here? What does this thing mean? This, when I say this is an introductory course in the field of political theory, what is that? We're going to be talking about that a bit today. Next class, we start with our first text in the class, which is Plato's Apology. It is in our textbook, but of course, it is also, as I said, I have posted the first couple of readings as a single PDF to our e-class, so you can go there and access that right away. In addition to, I've linked to the ebook through the library of our textbook. So you can look for Plato. Plato has a number of texts in the textbook or the PDF that I've posted, and we're reading Plato's Apology and Credo. Plato is an ancient Greek thinker who wrote in dialogues. He wrote in a dialogue style, and so we talk about Plato's dialogues. And the Apology is a short dialogue written by Plato. So is Credo. And then we will, after reading Apology on Thursday, and then on next Tuesday, we will talk about Credo. But then we will also get into our first very substantial, lengthy text in the class, and that is Plato's Republic. This is Plato's great text, his most famous text, and we will be spending a lot of time on Plato's Republic as getting our feet wet. We're going to work through it in a much slower pace than we will for other readings in the class because we're just getting used to things. The Republic is a quite challenging and complicated text, so we're going to work through that text much more slowly as we get our bearings in the course for the first number of weeks. So next week, after we look at Credo, we will look at the Republic. The Republic is broken up into 10 books, and we're not reading all of them, but we're really reading most of them, and we'll read them in the schedule that I've laid out here. So May 12th, we'll read book 1 of the Republic. Book 1 is like chapter 1. It's broken up into 10 books or chapters. On May 14th, we read books 2 and 3 of the Republic. On May 19th, we talk about book 4 of the Republic, and then we read some selections from there. So May 21st, we'll read a section from books 5 and 6. That's 471C to 502C. I will talk a little bit more about what I mean by that weird set of numbers. and letters in a little bit, but there's a particular there's a paragraph kind of line numbering system in Plato's texts, and so that's what I'm referring to when I say 471c to 502c. If you look at the margins of the text book, you will see a little line and paragraph numbering system, and that tells you that this is pointing to that. So 471c is like a paragraph line number, and it goes to 502c. Those are the sections from books 5 and 6 that you are required to read, and then book 7, section 514a to 521b. And then finally, May 26th, we will read all of Book 8 from the Republic and a short section from Book 9, 588b to 592b, and that completes our discussion of the Republic. After that, on May 28th, we spend one class reading a few sections from Aristotle's Politics. So that is our next book, our text that is in our textbook that we will be looking at. Aristotle's great text of political theory, and we read a whole bunch of sections and chapters from that text that week. They're very short chapters, so this might look like a lot, but it's not a huge amount for that class on Aristotle. After that, we will be spending 2 classes on Machiavelli, Niccolo Machiavelli, and his very famous text called The Prince. We will read the first half of it on June 2nd and the second half of it on June 4th. And finally, our last 2 weeks of the first half, June 9th and June 11th, we will be reading Thomas Hobbes's Leviathan. And you can see the sections that I've required there for Hobbes's Leviathan. And when we are scheduled to discuss them. And then we have our reading break, and then we come back from the reading break, and the first class back, June 23rd, is our mid-course in-person exam. So that's the first half schedule, and then we start, that's after that in-person exam, the Thursday, June 25th. From then, we'll have a new reading schedule, and that'll be part of the syllabus that I post, but I'm just stopping there for now. Okay, I saw that there were some questions, so let me look at the chat. One question, do you post the lectures the same day or is it a day later? So if we can't make it one day, when will you be able to watch the lecture? I will do my best to post it very shortly after lecture, same day of lecture. If I forget, it may be the next day, but I will do my best to get them posted very shortly after lecture. The Zoom takes some time to process the video, but then once I get notification that the video is ready, I will try to post it. Okay, so, and somebody asking me to show the tutorial parts again. So I will go back up here. And these are the tutorial times and the TAs that are assigned to them. Again, you should be assigned to either tutorial 1, 2, 3, or 4. Look at your registration, look at your course timetable, or maybe the e-class might show it as well. I'm not sure. Under your registration of the class, it should say tutorial 1 or 2 or 3 or 4. So make sure you know what tutorial section you are assigned to. Okay, I've been going on for a while. Sorry, let me you show the assignments page again. Okay, I will go there again. So here we go. in any case, let's take our a 10-minute break right now. It's 1:40-ish. We'll come back at 1:50 and we'll have a bit of a discussion here about what political theory is for the last part of class. We might need to go into next class a little bit on that discussion because I do want to spend some time really thinking about what this thing called political theory is. So let's take 10 minutes and come back, and I will pause here the um, recording, and then we'll resume in 10 minutes. See you then. Okay, so sorry, there's kind of a drier portion of the class, just kind of having to go through some of the nuts and bolts there of the syllabus. So apologies for that, but let's spend the remainder of our time here today trying to just start to think about what we're doing in this class. And the stuff that we're talking about today, we're setting the stage where you don't have to worry about it in terms of it's not going to be on any exams or anything like that. I just want us to think together a little bit, and I want to help kind of give you at least one example of how I might think about or some aspects of at least of this thing called political theory. So I've said in the first half and in the syllabus that this class is an introduction to the subfield of politics, of the discipline or the study of politics called political theory. In politics departments all over the world, if you have a department of politics, you'll have some political theorists, some people who study political theory as one field within that discipline. And so the question really is like, what defines this field? What is this field called political theory? So I'm just going to pull up my PowerPoint here, which I will do every class, and just so to help guide our discussion or structure our discussion a little bit here. So let me do that. Okay. So question here is, what is political theory? What makes political theory classes different from other classes that you might take in the politics department or in relation to other classes that you will take in general in your university life? So, of course, if you look at a concept like political theory and you want to think through what it is, you look at both parts of the concept or of the term. The question of what is the political or what is politics, and then the question of what is theory. So this is a discussion I want to have with you a little bit here to get our wheels turning and thinking about the kind of thing we're going to be doing in this class. So let me put it to you, any brave souls out there who are willing to kind of think with me a little bit here. If we think about political theory and its two parts, the political or politics and theory, what does that mean to you? So let's start with the first one, politics or the political. If we say that, what do we mean when we talk about the political or politics? Jordan, yes, thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you as well. I think politics I would summarize as the struggle for power amongst people and social organizations.
Okay, very good. So a couple of parts there. Power is a really crucial concept that you've brought into play, and that often is a very important defining concept when we think about the question of politics. So the question of power, and you say the struggle for power. So there's some kind of issue of contestation or struggle or organizing. And then the last term that's concept that stood out to me in what you said was social organization. So there's something about the collective, about the social that is involved in politics. It's not just about one of us or an individual, or so it's something to do with the collective and how we organize ourselves as a collective, as a society, as a social realm. So, okay, that gives us a good start. Others want to jump in here? What else? Yeah, Daniel.
Can we say like it's the series of policies and that we set for like a certain society?
Okay, very good. So, policy is another important word. So, what kinds of laws, what kinds of policies do we set and enforce on a society? So, again, we've got that idea of a society or collective, and what are the rules that govern things? What is enforceable? What are the standards or rules, parameters that are enforced on the collective? That's often something what we mean by the political or politics. Yes, John.
I'd say that it is the distribution of power and influence within a society, the ideologies that back that distribution of power, and the ends to which that power is working towards.
Okay, very good. So lots there. Like, so the distribution of power, what are the goals or ends or kind of the motivating factors for distributing power in this way or that way? It does leave the question still open a little bit. A couple of the different things we've heard to this point where we've talked about power. So the question is like, what's power? When we say politics is defined by something about power, the organization of power. John, you want to come back in here? How do you think of power when you say the distribution of power?
When I'm thinking of power, I'm thinking of many different things. There is judicial power, the power to enforce laws. There is the violent power that the state puts in place through armies and police. There is economic power through who has money and how much that money is worth, because politics and economics are very, very closely intertwined. And there is also legitimacy.
So you're breaking down for me different aspects of power, different like realms of power, economic power, but it still leaves a little bit of a question of like what is power? Like what is this thing called power? Let me hear from some others. Yeah, Sophian, if I'm pronouncing your name right.
Yeah, you are. Thanks. I think power, like one definition of power is like the ability to influence, like power is like the ability to influence like other people's actions, beliefs and conduct. And I'm just looking at specifically like what's the connection between political theory and power. I think that's like a core definition when it comes to that.
Yeah, very good. So the ability to influence or to kind of shape or impose your way. So this is where we go back to, we had talked about the laws or policies that are enforced on a society. We call that a kind of power because it's the way in which we organize rules and back them up so that people are somewhat kind of compelled or pushed or motivated in some way to follow those rules. So that's why we call it power, because it's something about influence, or coercion, or the ability to kind of shape what people do and to act in ways that we might want them to. Okay, Eva.
A word that comes to mind for me is like control.
Good. Very good. Okay. That's another. You want to say more, or just didn't want to
No,
cut you
that's
off
all.
if you. Okay. Yeah. So that's a great kind of concept to put on the table for us too. So there's a question of control. Who's in control? What are they doing with that control? Again, control is a neighboring word, an adjacent word to the idea of power, like influencing, getting others to do what we want in some way. That is a sense of control. So yeah, that's a very adjacent or important kind of related concept. Leighton, what are your
What
thoughts
comes
here?
to what's coming to mind for me is in sort of in a similar line to control is order. It's putting order to a chaos or an inordered space, whether that's imposing it or influencing it.
Very good. Excellent. So that's another really important word in political thought is order. The question of putting structure in place, putting parameters in place out of, maybe where they don't exist before, creating structure, whether literal or figurative structure, of behavior, of action, so as to reduce ambiguity, or as you said, something like chaos or anarchy or something like that, to create more structure or order. So that's very important, and how we do that as a collective. That's an important part of politics. Sonia.
Hi, Professor.
Hi.
Um, Thinking on, let's say, consensus of all that everyone has said so far. I'm thinking also in the lines of the capacity to shape behavior, control resources, and to basically maintain authority over others. And throughout all this, I think of the assumption where for all of this to occur, there will create a difference where this difference could be hierarchical, or you have the ruler versus those being ruled. You have the citizens, the outsider. You have those who are marginalized and those who are privileged, showing that power can overstep all of these boundaries and show their status in society.
Very good, very good, excellent. So yes, you've got it's this other important part of power and the ability to shape the actions of people. You always have some relation when you have structures of power. You introduce some sense of hierarchy. Who has more power than others? When power is distributed in particular ways, who gets more of it? Who gets less of it? Why? Um, that who's included, who's excluded. These are crucial questions when we think about how power influence. I forget maybe what there was another word that maybe was part of what you said, Sonia, there, that like but the how when we figure out how these things are organized, you also and distributed, you also figure out the inequalities or hierarchies there in terms of who has more power and who has less. Yes, John.
Yeah. To add on to that, you have to keep in mind that power politically is not always overt. There's covert power as well that shows up in forms that aren't fully noticed by society. They can be enforced on systemic levels instead of through laws or through ownership
Yes.
or through violence.
Very
For
good.
example,
Excellent.
patriarchy is a very good example of that.
Yeah, very good. So, power can be both, another way of putting it, what you've just said, power can be both formal and informal. It can be organized in very publicly known, publicized ways that are understood and articulated and publicized and enshrined in some way, or that ability to control others or that influence the actions of others, and the way in which that power is organized or structured, that can happen informally in ways that are implicit and that we don't necessarily name or at least name all the time, or it can be more formalized and explicit. So yes, that's a great point as well. Okay, so in thinking, we've got lots of great interventions there in thinking about what the political is, what politics is. We've got a bunch of different things. There's no single definition, but we just kind of like a web of different concepts and ideas that relate to the concept of power. All political concepts are messy. They're not going to be single definitions and strict the strict like formal rules about this. There are different ways of talking and thinking about these kinds of concepts. They are contested concepts. So power is just one of those. But we've got a good idea, a lot of things there about what's involved with thinking about power. It's something about influencing or shaping the behavior of people or of societies. It's about how the mechanisms through which behavior is shaped, the laws or the policies or the violence, the structures, informal or formal, that are in place that shape people's conduct and shape people's behaviors. We've got the idea of a collective, that happens. Politics is about a kind of social scale, the scale of a society, a collective of some kind, rather than of just like an individual. So it usually has to do with coordinating among a large group of people rather than just single person. And then it raises questions of hierarchy and inequality and difference. How does power organizes us differently from one another and in levels and hierarchies in relation to each other, and gives some of us more power and some of us less. And that's always contested. Those hierarchies of power are always very much contested. And then one last thing somebody had mentioned was power has different dimensions, different spheres. Power can be organized in a political dimension, an economic dimension. It can be organized in families. It can be organized in economies. It can be organized in countries. It can be organized globally. It operates at different scales and on different levels and different spheres. Okay, so we've got a good sense of the different things we mean by politics. Now, maybe a little bit more tricky, or at least something we don't think about quite as much, is the question of theory. When we say the word theory, what do we mean? What connotations arise for you when you hear the word theory? Any takers here? Yeah, Jordan.
Yeah, just briefly, I just want to say theory makes me think of perspectives, like different views on similar issues and how they conflict in their relationship with one another.
Okay, so perspectives or viewpoints, that's certainly going to be part of thinking about theory. But of course, theory can't just mean viewpoints or perspectives, because a lot of the time you can have clashing perspectives, but you're not necessarily doing the work of theorizing. So it can't just mean that, even though theorizing does involve having a viewpoint or a perspective. So let's try to unpack further. Yes, Eva.
I would say a theory articulates an observation of a pattern occurring within a certain field.
Excellent. Okay, so the observation or recognition of a pattern, that's an interesting word. So what are some patterns that emerge when we observe the political world? So if we're thinking about political theory, if we're taking what we just took as the meaning of politics, then theorizing about that or theories about politics is something about patterns of how power is organized or distributed. Okay, so the word pattern is an important one because it indicates something sustained, something that happens over time in a repeated way that's not just a one-off. Theory clearly involves something that is bigger than just a single instance. Okay, Andrew, let me hear from you. How do you think of theory?
Yeah, I think it's a way of like analyzing and interpreting ideas to understand like and evaluate them.
Okay,
And
very good. So analyzing, interpreting ideas, evaluation to evaluate them. That's an important word you've raised for us as well, the issue of evaluation. And that's one that I want to come back to. So certainly, yes, your theories help us analyze, and a word somebody else used previously, like observe and analyze the political world. But you're now raising the idea of like theories help us evaluate as well. That's an important idea that we have to grapple with. Let me hear from some others. Yeah, Anna.
Um, Usually theory involves some sort of evidence to back up an idea.
Okay, very good. So again, and this maybe goes back to the previous point about it's something substantiated, something that is there's some evidence for it, and it is patterned, it is repeated, it is something that is kind of enduring, and that um, we can capture in some way that is that we have some evidence for, and that we can see happens again and again. Okay, very good. Ewan, or sorry, I'm probably mispronouncing your name. How do you pronounce your name?
It's Iwin. It's just like Iwin without
Sorry.
space.
Iwan, sorry. Yeah.
I think it's like an idea that helps define and like compartmentalize different facets, and also help construct and explain like the bigger picture of what's happening in the political spectrum.
Mm-hmm. Okay, very good. So ideas, like kind of structuring or organizing ideas about, sorry, in the second part, remind me again of what you said, the second part of what you said? Ivan?
Constructing like a bigger picture to help explain
yes.
what's happening.
Yes. So the bigger picture, that's an important aspect as well. The idea that theory is something that involves the bigger picture in some sense. Something fundamental. Usually when we think about theory, sometimes we think of it, one word that's adjacent to theory is philosophy, the philosophy of something. And when we say that, it's like something, sometimes we mean the bigger picture, the overall kind of framework, or if we can either think of it from above, the overall, the overarching, or we can think of it from below, the foundations. What's the foundation on which something is built? What's deeply fundamental about it? So usually theory involves something that's like overarching, or it's like fundamental. But either way, it's enduring. It's the bigger picture, not just the particular instances, but something more general. So we often think about theory as being general, often we think of it as the abstract in some way. The abstract aspect of theory is the part that is more around um, you know, what transcends any particular instance, any particular example, or any particular time and place? What's the bigger picture? That's usually what we're dealing with theory. Now, that's still pretty abstract in itself, but I'll say more about it shortly. John, yeah, you want to get back in here?
Yes. What exactly separates political theory from political philosophy?
Yeah, I mean, there's no single answer to that. So that's a contested terrain. Some people think about those two as synonymous, and some people draw distinctions between those two, but they can be used by some quite synonymously. So I don't necessarily want to get too bogged down in, disputes about the difference between those terms. I want to just think more conjecturally about the main connotations we have with either something like theory or philosophy. Now, we sometimes think about theory in a different way, in a more scientific way. Sometimes we think about theory as say, Einstein's theory of relativity or the theory of gravity. When we think about theory in a scientific way, what do we mean by that? What does theory mean in that sense? Any thoughts on that of when we use theory in that way, this kind of scientific sense of theory, how would you explain that connotation of theory? Sonia, do you want to get on this? I know your hand was up before, but
Oh yeah, it was up before, but I think my answer may align with what you're asking. Thinking of theory in the political sense, I was thinking of how we approach essays, where we have who the essay is talking about, what, when, where, and how, basically the framework. And in this sense, as you said, it's the foundation and it's also the framework, but we also have to bear in mind it shapes how we ask and interpret these questions, and it goes beyond description. It's basically you're digging and you're dissecting the entirety of the theory and how we approach it, and it helps us to analyze how things are, why the way they are this way, and how they have come to be this way, and what changes occur over time.
Very good. Yes. So that last part is really important. Theories often tell us what are the main causes of something, why fundamental explanation for something. Why do things happen the way they do? What are the main forces at play? What are the cause and effect relations? What are the main causes that produces what effects? So theories are sometimes used to predict things because they give us underlying or fundamental explanations for why something happens the way it does. Now, that's just one kind of theory when we use it in the more scientific sense. But we also use theory, notice, in the sense of a model or a blueprint. Sometimes we use theory not as a fundamental explanation, but sometimes we say theory is like an ideal. Let me just and when we talk about it in this way, we talk about theory in relation to what? Practice. Theory and practice. That's a distinction or a binary that we often draw. Theory versus practice. When we say theory versus practice, we're thinking about theory as the ideal, as the model or the blueprint, and practice as the messy realities of actuality. So sometimes we use theory to mean an ideal. Sometimes we use it to mean a fundamental explanation of something. Political theory, we kind of think about it. It does both of these things. Political theory will kind of help us think about the fundamental realities of politics. What are the main causes and explanations of why things happen the way they do in political life? But it also is a realm that deals with blueprints, ideals, the idea of what could or should be. that's a different idea of theory that is also involved in this idea of political theory. Okay, there's more I want to say about this, so we'll come back to it on Thursday before we jump into our first text, but I'm out of time and I don't want to go too far over and set a bad precedent for my first lecture here. So we'll sign off at this point, and thank you all very much for being here and for your engagement. And we will see you on Thursday. I can stick around for questions, but if you need to go, then feel free. Jordan, you have a question?
Yeah, sir. Thank you very much. This is in the wake of us going ahead and doing these readings. So if we want to take like notes from the readings, what sort of things should we be looking for? Like what should sort of prompt our thought process in taking good notes from the readings? Because like these are very like deep, rich texts, as you said.
Yeah,
and I
yeah.
don't want to just be reading it mindlessly. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a really good question. And I think the main thing at this point is to be trying to pull out key arguments, key strands like of an argument, because sometimes the arguments are going to be winding or difficult to follow. And so you want to pull out key arguments from the text. What do you take the author to be arguing for? And crucially, pay attention to, it's always really helpful when you're trying to look for an author's argument. Try to also think through what are they arguing against? What do they seem to be disagreeing with? Who do they seem to be setting their argument up against as opponents or alternatives? So that's important. Trying to understand the arguments and what they're arguing for and what they're arguing against. The other thing I would say to try to always be taking notes on is what are you confused by? What are the things that are not quite making sense? What does the author mean by this? That's going to help a lot. You can bring those questions to lecture. You can bring those questions to tutorial, especially, and they can really help because if you have that question, other people will have that question, and these texts are not going to be straightforward. So you will have questions. If you don't have questions, you're not reading carefully enough. These are not straightforward, transparent texts that you should have no questions. They should just make sense. There are lots of puzzles. There are lots of confusions. There are lots of issues to be grappled with. So that's what I would say. Think about what the argument is for, what the argument is against, and what questions do you have, what confusions do you have about the text. I'd say that's the best starting point for taking notes and trying to understand these texts. But good question.
Thank you.
Iwan, do you have a question?
Yeah, yes, sir. I have a question regarding to absences. I can't recall if you already covered this. So I'm required from my work to be in for certain events, as I'm like one of the few members who have access to certain places in the building. And I'm just wondering, like, will I lose marks if I report absences in advance? How does it go forward?
Well, like I said, you're not required, you're not going to be penalized or have any requirements in terms of lecture attendance. I strongly recommend it, but I'll post the video recordings after lecture and you can watch those back. And so there's no requirements there, but you do have requirements in terms of tutorials. Those do have mandatory attendance. And so you're going to need to do your best to obviously, whenever possible, make sure that your schedule your work schedule doesn't conflict with your tutorial schedule. And then the most important thing is making sure you are available during the in-person exams. Because missing a tutorial here and there isn't going to harm you tremendously, but it may affect your grade a bit. Again, you'll have to talk to your TAs about how exactly they're going to weight your attendance, but the main thing that can have a big effect is making sure you're free for the in-person exams.
Yes, yeah, I'll be there 100% for the in-person exams. I just got a couple of events coming up in the following week that I have to attend, and I'll
So
take some.
you don't have to let me know about lecture, but your TAs, you should, if you're gonna miss there, and you might want to let them know, because that's where attendance is going to be taken.
Right on.
Okay.
Do you know how much percentage is each tutorial worth?
No, I don't. Again, you'll have to inquire with your TA about how they're going to assess you that way.
All right, roger that. Thank you very much, Professor.
Thank you. Take care.
Have a good day.
Jordan.
Thank you. Yeah, I just have one more admin question. Is there any flexibility to overload a tutorial if it conflicts with a student's schedule?
How do you mean overload?
Yeah, well, isn't there like a required amount of people allowed in the tutorial? But say
Oh,
if
in
like,
that sense,
yeah,
yeah.
yes, sorry.
There may be, and it would require sometimes there's people moving around, so there might be some moving around that happens, and so a spot might open up, or we could do an overload if the TA agrees to it. They would have to agree to it because that's, adding extra responsibility for them and extra in numbers. So there's a possibility of doing it, but we'd have to get the permission of the TA. So if you have an issue there, email me and let me know the conflict. Let me know the tutorial you're enrolled in, what one you'd like to get into, and I can look into that further.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Professor.
Thanks. And Anna.
Just a quick question. I'm sorry if it's an obvious one, but about the digital textbook. We are totally okay to cite the digital version over the physical one for any like essays or anything like that. Is it the same textbook, or are there different?
It's the same textbook, the same page numbers, yeah. The only thing to be the ebook from the library is a bit different because it's formatted a bit differently, but even the ebook in the library that you access through the library portal, even that I think indicates the hard copy page numbers on it. But the PDF that I am willing to provide you has the same page numbers exactly as the hard copy textbook. So those are exactly the same.
Okay, so if we were to use the PDF, we just cite it as we would the hard copy, but if we use the online copy, we'd have to cite it not differently, but like it would just be cited a bit differently in terms of how it's like.
You would have to. It's a little bit less straightforward in terms of the page numbers, but I'll talk more about that when we get a bit closer to needing to deal with that. I'll talk a little bit more about how to cite the library ebook.
Okay, and then the PDF is literally just from the textbook.
The PDF is exactly
I just was
the
trying
same,
to figure out what would be easier in terms of citation, and
Yeah.
what would be if there was like any major differences. But okay, that makes sense.
Okay.
All right, thank
Thanks.
you. Have a good one.
Okay, you too. Take care. All right, and so don't see any other questions, so we'll leave it there. Have a good day, folks, and see you on Thursday.
We're just going through a